for those that may be joining us now that may have missed. For those that didn't, you can hear it again. So, Sheriff Darren Balaam, thank you for joining me for another Did You Know Facebook Live. Before I get started and introduce my guest today, I want to remind everybody, please send in your questions, whether it has to do with this topic we're going to talk about today, or it's just a question you want to ask the Sheriff's Office. This is your opportunity. We do want to hear from you. I'm going to talk about the end, but I'm going to put a plug in right now. We are right now in the midst of our community survey, so please, we want to hear from our community. We want to know how we're doing, how we can better strengthen our services and our partnerships in our community. So back to Did You Know? So the Sheriff's Office, we serve you in our community, and we've always looked to how do we do better. And so last year, we had a lot of unrest. We had the George Floyd incident. And so one of the things within the Sheriff's Office we looked at is we went to our own employees. And we heard some concerns from them about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And so one thing we thought about and we heard was we wanted to have a class for our entire office. And so we worked together, and I reached out, and I'm introducing to my good friend Diaz Dixon to come in and train this training. So a little bit about, before we get into training, a little bit about Diaz. So Diaz is currently the CEO of Eddie House, which deals with youth experiencing homelessness.
Correct.
And also before that, he was the CEO of Step 2 for 14 years, where he was instrumental in building a multi-million-dollar campus, which has helped a lot of women and children get back onto their feet and the road to success. Graduate from UNR.
That's right.
And also played basketball at UNR, and then went on to receive his master's at the University of Iowa. So, Diaz, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Sheriff. It's a pleasure to sit here and chat with you.
So, if you remember, about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a little lunch, and I asked you an important question, and that was, would you come in? And at the time, we were having a lot of unrest in our nation, and come talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with the entire Sheriff's Office. So come into law enforcement, which, unfortunately throughout our nation, law enforcement, our communities, we're having a struggle. How did you feel I'd like to get your perspective when we sat down there?
Well, first, I have to say that I was honored that you would ask me. Anytime someone wants to ask you about coming and talking before people who are the heart of our community and providing such a great civil service is an honor. And at the same time, I was nervous because I started looking at this like, at first I said, yeah, that'll be great. Let's get this going. And after I left you, I started thinking, whoa, wait a minute. I'm going to be standing in front of law enforcement and other civil servants right at a time where our country is really torn apart. There's so so much terror and other trauma that's happening when people think of law enforcement. They say law enforcement, people of color. There are so many different places where people are bumping heads. Now I have to figure out, how do I get in here, be a bridge to be able to talk about some of these really important but very uncomfortable topics, and still do it while putting aside some of the own pieces that I was nervous about. So quite frankly, I was nervous.
Well, I have to say, again, I want to thank you. I went through the training. I thought it was quite fun. One thing I took away from talking to you after you'd done a couple of these courses, because you did our entire office, all 731 employees. It took us a little bit, but was you said, one, there was every class, you showed certain slides and there would be some conversation. You often saw almost every class, several people would come up and either want to have a longer chat after, or they reached out and said, hey, can I come meet you for coffee? Kind of, what was your feeling when you saw that? And if you can share without, violating whatever confidence what were their concerns?
Well, that was probably the most important takeaway from me, is that it showed that people were paying attention, that people were really listening and tuning in and doing some introspection to how some of these topics made them feel. But for them to reach out and say, I want to have conversation, and we've gone and had conversation. I still have a number of people I'm going to be meeting with. They're talking about their own personal struggles and how they fit in, how they fit into the department, or how they fit into the community, and overall, how can they be part of the solution and how they can carry on the conversation. This is what's really different today than, say, 10, 20 years ago. People would talk about these incidents and it just stopped. they were showing that they didn't want this to be a check the box training. They wanted this to be something that really has an impact on how they carry on their lives and their careers moving forward. So that part was huge. And you're right. The first trainings that I did at the end of last year compared to the trainings that I did just last week, they shifted and changed because I was learning so much. I was learning what are the different things that I can touch on, talk about, push on, because I would tell them that I'm here to judge you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to nudge you. And so I would change some of the slides. So the very last trainings that were done were different from the ones earlier. And we were able to even get more information out. But it was it was really enlightening to see people want to dig in, no matter how passionate they were about all the topics. And we had people from different opinions all over the place. It was good for people to have a safe place to be able to talk about these things. And then I was also hearing that people continued to talk about it after the training in the office. That's when you know you're really having some impact.
Well, and so that was my thing after we were done. And again, I talked to you about this was, again, we always can improve our services. We always can improve when it comes to diversity, serving our community. So moving forward, taking away what you learn from us as well as what we learned from you, from the community perspective, how can the sheriff's office start again strengthening or building or maybe repairing some of those relationships because we serve our entire community. That is, I think everybody says that when we're in law enforcement, we hear and when we start hiring, why did you come to law enforcement? I want to make a difference. I want to, help people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from the community perspective, how do taking away what you learned from us, what would you say? How can we continue this and strengthen even more?
Well, I think us being able to, from the department standpoint, being able to show the community that before you put a badge and a gun on, you're human. And the empathy part is what's missing in so many different areas. We've had empathy missing from the police side. We've had empathy missing from the community side. And really, at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want unity. We want connection. And that was coming out on a regular basis in a lot of these trainings. Unfortunately, only law enforcement and sheriff's office were in the actual training and the community wasn't in there. We have to figure out how to take these communications and these conversations that we're having and how do we have them regularly with people in the community in a place where they can show up, in a place that's safe to talk about the struggles and the things that are very uncomfortable. And that's what's going to help us build trust between both sides. This is one of the few things in this world that doesn't stay static. You're either building it or you're breaking it. And 20 broke it a lot. We broke it and broke and broke it. You calling me in to have this conversation, I think, is a wonderful bridge at building. And now we need to take all the wonderful things I learned about our sheriff's department. I want to take those things and how do we sprinkle it across the valley so that people know that you're making the attempts. For instance, people can come in and take a tour of the jail at any time. I think the average person doesn't know that. We need to bridge those gaps so that we have some connection. People in the community can come in and meet people and see the human side and build empathy.
Well, and that's one thing we have in our survey because it was important for us is the community engagement. And unfortunately, we're still, dealing with pandemic, and
COVID.
I think some of us are getting Zoom fatigue or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But we're starting to see hopefully that opening and the 50% soon. And before, I don't know if it because we may or may not have talked about it was our Citizens Academy, and I agree with you. Right in those Citizens Academy, we give the community that opportunity to see a little bit about everything that not only we do because we partner with Reno and Spark, so there's a little bit of difference between sheriffs and police, but everything we do, but then we also take back from them. And some of the things I would encourage, and I'd like to hear that was for I want to say 5-6 years on and off. We've done the community symposium,
Oh, yeah.
or I think the last time we called it the forum. But it seems like at least from the law enforcement, we get a good section, but it's the same individuals coming every day and or every year when we have that symposium. And so moving forward, I agree with you as we can safely do it is that the community picnics, and that's something we're looking at, or other ways to expose because we can show the community what we do, but also take back of all right, what are some challenges that we could do better, learning from the community of how we provide that service to you and building that trust.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great that you've been doing those forums and that you're pulling people in. And the tough part is when the same faces keep showing up over and over again. I think we're going to have to do a better job from the nonprofit standpoint of nonprofits and grassroots nonprofits getting involved, because all of the clients that we have at different agencies need to have some connection and need to have a positive perspective on the sheriff's office and the great things that are going on. And that might be another way to infuse a different set of faces that are coming in on a regular basis.
Well, yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I was just going to say we can do a better job from the nonprofit perspective in helping with that.
I love it. And one thing in our just conversation that you kind of took away that was interesting. I wasn't expecting it from those either after the class or when you've met. Is just some of the differences, and we've talked about and we've had courses over our careers, probably the last I'd say 5 to 7, about the certain generations,
Mm-hmm.
and that was something that for me was kind of here it was diversity, equity and inclusion, but yet there's still within our organization some things we need to look at when it comes to different generations that you've heard. Can you share some of that? Because that would to me was like, wow, I didn't.
Yeah, it became abundantly clear that there's a difference between Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, the different age groups, the amount of people that are in the department that have been there for a long time. And as they're going out, the newbies that are coming in and a large influx, but there are very distinct views on policing and how things have changed with our community as our community has changed. And what that leads to is it leads to different pockets, different cultures inside the sheriff's office that have to figure out how to navigate. And sometimes there aren't a lot of bridges between those. So that was something that I learned working towards the end, but having a great conversation with you, and you're saying that's something that you want to take a strong look at. And how can we improve on those? I think the biggest thing for the community is to see that we have a sheriff's office that is being progressive and looking honestly at its own systems and its relationships with the community and wants to be a part of the solutions to a lot of these things that are happening in other areas to ensure they don't happen here and to just strengthen our community as a whole. So that's a huge positive.
Well, again, I really want to thank you for coming in. I know on both sides, just like you said, you were a little apprehensive of, oh, I'm coming in law enforcement, right?
Mm-hmm.
After everything that's been going on throughout our nation. And I know there was some feelings because I could hear it in the hallway of, okay, what is this Diaz going to do?
Right.
And it was nice to hear that you created that space where we could have those conversations and we can continue. On our own diversity and inclusion committee, I know that was a conversation, and they either are meeting with you afterwards to kind of get that brief of, okay, how do we do that when it comes to retention and hiring for all employees, but
Yeah.
we have to have that mixture, and that's the one thing you pointed out when you walked in the hall. I think you probably asked in every class.
I asked in every class. I did.
And that's something we know we need to work on when it comes to how do we get that diversity and all the ranks,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we encourage people, and that's where I look to, and I love the nonprofit because the symposium was more maybe faith based, and we've created that regional faith based pre-COVID
Mm-hmm.
a faith-based breakfast, but maybe now we need to look at those non-partnerships. So as we again can safely get people in groups, how do we come out? We teach more, and if on our end we've had a bad call and somebody's had a bad experience, we can sit down and talk about, okay, how do we repair that? Or on
Right.
the other end of, okay, when law enforcement comes, here's why we do what we do. I explain to my students a lot. Um, why when they make a traffic stop, hey, you know me in a uniform, I don't know you, and like you said, we're all human, and at the end of the day, I want to go home.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why I may be blatant and a little cautious, but we still should be respectful of
Right.
everybody.
Right.
So again, I absolutely want to thank you for everything you did, and I look forward to your partnerships and those, the evaluation of our agency.
Well, and I want to thank you too, because I learned a tremendous amount in going through it. And relationships are a two-way street. And oftentimes we think the best relationships are 50-50. Well, law enforcement should be doing this and we do this. The best relationships are 60-40. And sometimes you're the 60 and sometimes you're the 40. And that support goes both ways. So it was great to dig in on conversations like that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And so for everybody out there, again, thank you for joining us for our Facebook Live. If you have any questions, we will answer them. I want to put another reminder out there, though. If you have any questions, even if it wasn't about this topic that Di hasn't just talked about, please email them into our Facebook Live, email them into our web, email them into our Facebook call, but also please do the community survey. That will be open for the next couple of weeks. You can access it either on our webpage. We've done a media release. If you can find that, you can go on our Facebook page. But we want from you. We want to know what we're doing well, what maybe we can improve on, what we may not be doing well, and how moving forward we can improve. Because again, we're here to serve our community. We want to together make that difference. So again, thank you, Dias, for joining me today. I appreciate it. I look forward to our partnerships on every aspect as we move forward. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Sheriff. Greatly appreciated and happy to be here.
And for all of you out there, thank you for joining me today. Again, make sure you turn on your notifications so that our next Facebook Live next month, it lets you know, and do our survey. Please have a great day and be safe.